Today is Wednesday, June the 21st, 2006. We are in Albany and we're speaking with Dennis Hughes. That's Denishughes, president of the New York State AFL-CIO.
Right.
Dennis, to begin with, I wonder if you can tell me when you first remember hearing about an organization called CSEA.
I'll tell you when. It was about 75. I was organizing electricians in Willowbrook State School. Willowbrook State School had been pretty much dismantled, and they were going into home care, a private home care. A lot of people going out, and they changed the status of it. And I was trying to organize these workers, and I ran into a shop steward whose name I can't remember. And he helped me out. He told me when they were coming in, what they were doing, and so forth. And I said, well, what union are you with? He says, well, I'm with CSEA. And Civil Service Employees Association. He says, and we represent the people here and state workers. And that was the first time I really met CSEA, and I realized then that they were really committed to the needs of, even then, committed to the needs of other unions around them.
Mm-hmm. Now, at that time, when you're talking about trying to organize electricians who were doing work at the Willowbrook State School, CSEA was not part of the AFL-CIO.
No, they weren't part of the AFL-CIO at that time, but they still had a very cooperative nature. At least on Staten Island, the union on Staten Island was very cooperative.
Okay. So then how did your relationship develop over the years with CSEA?
Well, I did a lot of political work over the years for my local union at the time, and I got to know members of CSEA. And then at the time of, I guess around 1980s or so, in the 1980s, we started to work directly with CSEA through this New York City Central Labor Council. Then when I became part of the state AFL-CIO, we started to work with CSEA in a lot of different ways, and it was the start of the rebirth of the labor movement in this state from 1980 to the present.
Now, CSEA did formally become a part of the AFL-CIO in the late 70s when it affiliated with AFSCME. But there was also, it seemed, an evolution of the organization's relationship with the New York State AFL-CIO that probably took a number of years to develop.
Yeah, it did.
What do you remember about that time?
Well, I remember that. What I remember is the relationship, the really strong relationship that Bill McGowan had with Ed Cleary, who was my predecessor. Bill McGowan was, as you know, a very easy guy to get to know. And he and Ed were really able to do a lot of things that people didn't think they were able to do. They were able to work on many projects together and different things together. And there was really, at that point, both of them realized that both organizations could benefit from a better relationship, and a relationship was forged.
Talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of times people see policy issues and debates, particularly in places like Albany, and very often what seems to cut through the deadlock is the relationship between the individuals who are involved, the willingness to work together. Can you talk about what you've seen with that?
Yeah, it's a very big part of what we do. I mean, you have to be, see, labor leaders in general are people that get along with other people. They like other people. If you don't like other people, you don't like to interact with people, this is not the job for you. In CSEA, I'll give you a quick example. My relationship with Dan Donahue. We were able to do things that people didn't think we were able to do. Danny and CSEA were very, very instrumental, probably the driving force in the creation of a pension COLA here in New York, something that never was done before. And if it wasn't for Danny's willingness to sit down and allow all the other points of view to come into play and then work them out, if it wasn't from his willingness to do that and to direct his staff to stay with this, we never would have had that game. So personal relationships are crucial, and it's just great that we have that type of relationship with CSEA today.
Mm-hmm. While you raise the issue of COLA, talk a little bit more about how that came to pass, because certainly when you talk about an issue like the New York State pension system, it's a very complex subject generally. It's probably more difficult to deal with reform issues because there are 7 different pension systems, multiple unions involved with it, lots of different interests, and then the management entities on top of that. But even just bringing the labor side together to forge some consensus must be a very difficult task. And I wonder if you talk about how that.
It's very difficult. I mean, what you have to do is listen to everyone. Everyone has, you know, when you think of it, I mean, large unions, small unions, everybody has really a legitimate point of view because they're representing members. And that's another thing about CSEA. Although, you know, they're a large, very large organization, they are sensitive to the needs of other unions around them. From my perspective, I get a chance to see that. And that was key, because if we would have just done what was good for the large unions, the AFSCME, the teachers, CSEA, it wouldn't have been as effective, because we would have had political pressure from others to change things or maybe block it. We were able to put together a coalition of people, and it was through that type of willingness, Danny's and CSEA's willingness at the time, to share power. And that's an important thing, you know, to share power. If you're a powerful organization, it's very important to be able to use that power for the good, not only of your members directly, but of the labor movement in total terms. And CSEA does that really well.
Why do you think that is?
Because it's an attitude. You know, you develop an attitude based on your take of what is around you. You develop an attitude based on your concept of solidarity, based on the labor movement as a social force. You truly see your place in this. CSEA is a leader in what we do. The state AFL-CIO could not be the state AFL-CIO that it is without the input of CSEA. But CSEA understands too that not only, in my opinion, not only are they interested in the needs of their workers, which is their primary focus, but they want to move everybody along with them. And that's unique, and it's something that makes this movement what it is.
How did the New York State AFL-CIO change when CSEA began getting more involved? Obviously, they were bringing a lot of people to the table.
Well, you know, there was the financial benefit, first of all. You know, the CSEA came into it and allowed us to be more financially solvent, and allowed us to concentrate on some of the things that we didn't do before, some of the media activities, you know, the support of legislation in the general, out into the general public. But more than that, it gave us a certain expertise. It brought in a lobbying expertise. It brought in a leadership expertise. It brought in a feeling that the labor movement is one. You know, when the leaders in the Capitol look upon the labor movement in New York State, they see it representing all workers, private sector, public sector, small locals, big locals, and CSEA rounded that out, you know, gave it that point of view. Then on top of that, CSEA has members all over the state. They have members in all parts of the state. Wherever there's state government, there's CSEA members. So it gives us a geographical spread that we didn't have before. So they're very important to the strength of this organization, my organization.
On kind of an ongoing basis, I mean, beyond specific issues, how do you forge consensus in the AFL-CIO? I mean, a lot of people on the outside tend to think of the Fed as one voice speaking for labor, but there really are lots of sometimes disparate voices within that federation, and a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
Well, first you have to lay out what the issue is and what the facts are. You know, what are the facts of the situation? What is the opportunity? And I'll give you the pension COLA. The opportunity at that point was a very strong stock market and a very strong investment portfolio for state government. So we knew that to be the fact. And we also knew that what we wanted to do was to make the state pension funds, all 7 of them or 8 of them, all those funds be able to provide the type of security that people needed. So what we did was we let everybody lay out what their perspectives were. And once we laid out their perspectives, we tried to boil it down to one particular item. And once we got it down to 1 or 2 or 3 particular items in this case, we were able to move forward. So you have to have a message that's common to everyone. You have to have a theme that everybody understands, and you have to have a goal that raises all boats. So when you look at it that way, it's not really hard to do.
Talk a little bit about some of the successes over the years in dealing with CSEA and having the AFL-CIO working hand in hand with CSEA. Certainly, I know in the late '90s there was a ballot question for a constitutional convention, and labor was very effective in defeating that measure that could have brought a host of problems for labor organizations.
We did the constitutional amendment to eliminate the, what we wanted to eliminate was a new constitutional convention. And the reason for that is that everything, all the safeguards that are in the state constitution become in play if they were to change that. The guarantee on pensions, the prevailing rate questions for the building trades and others, the whole issue of how schools are funded, all the things, property tax, everything was in the game, the school tax. So we wanted to make sure that, you know, we didn't lose the gains that we had, we worked so hard to put in the Constitution over the last 60 or 70 years. And we also knew that you know, it wasn't a question of reform, it was a question of taking away the safeguards that we held dear. So we beat back the Constitutional Convention in with a very, very extensive media campaign and grassroots campaign, and we did that. Over the years, we also did a lot of things on budget issues, tax issues over the years with CSEA. I mean, just about every budget that George Pataki put in place, we were able to amend and beat back some of the horrible things involved in it. And that was done with both a grassroots campaign and a media campaign that we were happy to coordinate with CSEA and others. We also were able to restructure the central labor councils and area labor federations in the state, which was a monumental task and an ongoing task, and we wouldn't have been able to get even close to that if it wasn't for CSEA support. Then we go into the pension COLA piece that really is so important, and just, you know, just day-to-day legislation where the strength of CSEA as the organization it is helps us out. Whether or not that organization that legislation is geared directly to CSEA. CSEA has, over the years, helped many people achieve their goals.
One of the very important recent pieces of legislation that labor was successful in securing was called the Worksite Security Act.
Yes.
Why is a fight like that so important?
Well, you know, it sets a floor. You know, all workers should, everybody that goes to work should have some degree of confidence that they're going to be there in a safe environment. And what legislation like this does is create that attitude across all private and public sector employers, that they have an obligation to protect the lives of working men and women while they're at the workplace. And that's why it was so easy for all of us to get behind that.
But, I mean, a piece of legislation like that, one would think is common sense, yet it took a significant fight and a number of years to actually get it passed. Why is there
well, there's financial, you know, there's financial implications involved in these things, but more importantly, it is the age-old struggle between trying to get management who feel that they have sort of a lock on decision-making to do things that are right and decent for working men and women. You know, what it's about, the whole thing is about, and the reason why we're all here is democracy in the workplace. And we're trying to build that democracy not only in our organized unions, but in just about every workplace in the state.
How is CSEA different or alike to other unions that you've encountered?
Well, first of all, they're different in that they're big, they're large, they're all over the state, they're in every political jurisdiction, they're in every municipality and so forth. That's the first piece. So they have this geographic and spread that makes them very important to everyone. The second thing is attitude. There's an attitude in CSEA that they are a statesman in the labor community, that they want to make sure that they want to use whatever power they have, not only, as I said earlier, not only for their good, but for the good of all workers. So there's a certain and a real commitment to solidarity that CSEA has exhibited.
Okay. Tell me about more about some of the cast of characters that you've encountered within CSEA. You mentioned Bill McGowan. I wonder if you'd give us a description of your dealings with him.
Bill McGowan was a very smart guy, very open guy, you know, to us anyway, and he really had the leadership qualities of his generation, you know, that mix of toughness and smartness and a willingness to take it, to take a fight to its conclusion that marked labor leaders of his generation. He was a great guy to be around, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to work with him.
You mentioned that he had a very good relationship
with
your
Ed Cleary. Yeah, Ed Cleary and Bill McGowan were both from that same generation. A generation that actually was around in the heyday of the labor movement in the 50s and 60s, and were really, committed to make sure that whatever progress we had attained, we held on to. And they were also institution builders, both of them. Cleary was an institution builder, rebuilt the institution of the state AFL-CIO, and Bill McGowan had that same attitude, that he was going to leave that organization better than he found it.
Certainly, Bill McGowan was a very colorful
yes.
individual. Do you remember anything memorable in some of your dealings, or any?
I didn't. I was a lot younger at that point in time, and I had a lot of respect for Bill, so I didn't really get into the. I wasn't really in the personal, social whirlwind of Bill McGowan.
Okay. Bill McGowan's successor was Joe McDermott.
Joe McDermott was
CSEA president,
and he was on our executive board. Came to our executive board for his whole term. Joe was a little more reserved guy in his dealings, but he had a very interesting dry humor that I enjoyed, and he was very helpful to me. He was very helpful to me. He was, the thing about Joe is that he'd let you know how you were doing on a periodical basis, which was very interesting. But after a while, I got to a point where I considered him a friend.
Okay. When you say that he let you know how you were doing, I mean, he would be critical of.
Yeah, I'm not critical in a positive sense. I mean, he'd call and tell me, when we had some, he felt that things were going in a direction, even if it wasn't, on his issues. A lot of the criticism, some of the criticism was really to give me some degree of support. In other words, saying to me, Dennis, look, if you do this, you're going to run into a wall, or whatever that was. He was good in that way.
At that time, when you were working on the political side for the AFL-CIO?
Actually, at that point, I was Cleary's executive assistant, okay. So I had more and more day-to-day relationships with the executive board.
So he was basically, kind of providing some regular feedback to you,
yeah,
so that the relationship could work better.
I think I had a very good relationship in that respect with Bill, with Joe.
With Joe, okay.
Yeah.
Then transitioned to Danny Donahue, again very different from Joe McDermott.
Yeah, Danny, Danny was actually the president when I became the president, and Danny was very helpful in me becoming the president. The thing about Danny is that he understands this movement very well. He came up through it, he spent a lot of time learning it, and he understands it very well. And we both have sort of the same sense of what it is that we want to do here, It really is, the thing about Danny is that he's selfless when it comes to this stuff, He doesn't really have and it's really refreshing to see, he doesn't really have a attitude of that it's him running, it's Danny Donahue, member of CSEA. And he's the president of it, but he sees himself as a member. He has the sensibilities of a member. And that's a both refreshing and very important thing to have.
How have you seen that serve him in dealing with state elected officials and people?
Well, he speaks really from a position of experience. He knows what it's like to be a member. He knows what it's like to be a worker. He knows what insecurities working men and women have, and he never forgot that. He brings that to the table, and he sits down when he brings that sensibility to all his dealings with elected officials and others, and it's an important gift.
How have you seen CSEA change and evolve over the time that you've been watching them?
It's become, over the last 20 years, I would say over the last 10 or so, it's really become a much more respected in its professionalism. In the way it represents its members, in the way it conducts itself legislatively, both on a local level and on a state level. It is really sort of the go-to union. It is, the largest, most important public sector union. There are the teachers and others are important as well, but CSEA has a whole different pitch because it represents workers at so many levels of state government. So I think that I'd have to say that professionalism is the best approach to it.
One of the things that, one of the phrases that we'll often use in-house here when we talk about CSEA is that one of our strengths is our reasonableness and one of our weaknesses is our reasonableness. How does that idea play out in terms of the struggle within the labor movement, that there are always people who want to be a little bit more aggressive and those that want to go along and get along?
Well, I think, first of all, go along and get along doesn't describe CSEA in any way. CSEA has a very measured approach to things that comes with their experience and professionalism, as I just mentioned. What you have to do here is recognize that you're here for the long haul, that when you're representing members, it's a very serious business, and that you don't want to march people off a cliff. You have to understand the circumstances around you. You have to have a professional approach to collective bargaining, which CSEA does. I don't know if I mentioned that, but their approach to collective bargaining is, and the successes that they've had in collective bargaining is noted and admired by, I think, anybody that has to do with collective bargaining in general terms. So I would say that it comes with the professionalism that CSEA has put together allows it to move along in a steady pace without having like hills and valleys and when there's a conflict, CSEA is there for the conflict. When there's a problem, CSEA is there to straighten out the problem. I haven't seen them back off of anything, and I know that not only that, they have lent that type of professionalism to other unions in their strikes and struggles as well.
I've asked this of all of the participants in this project. Why do you think CSEA has been able to survive for 100 years?
Because they do their job, and they do their job well. First, they represent their members well. They understand what their members need, and they are willing to go out and find the best people to do the jobs that provide that safety net for their members. That's it. They're a well-run organization. They have a tradition of being a well-run organization. And when organizations like this are well run, they perpetuate.